Are Roth contributions deductible without penalty if under 59.5 and in the account for less than 5 years? So the key thing that we're talking about here is the 5-year rule within a Roth IRA. And the 5-year rule works a number of ways. But to answer the question short and quick, you can withdraw contributions from a Roth IRA anytime tax-free, penalty-free. Contributions, money that you put into the Roth IRA. However, you may have to pay taxes and penalties on earnings in your Roth IRA if you pull it out early. Now, you know that we talk about this all the time. Never interrupt compound interest unnecessarily. So if you can avoid doing this at any and all costs, absolutely try to avoid pulling out money out of a retirement account early, because you can't get that money back in there later on. You lose that year when you pull the money out. But if you absolutely have to, maybe you're trying to get out of really bad credit card debt, or you're trying to get out of a really bad situation, then maybe you're going to have to do that. And if you have to do that, you can withdraw the money that you contributed penalty and tax free. But the Roth IRA has something called a 5-year rule, which says you cannot withdraw earnings tax free until it's been at least 5 years since you first contributed to the Roth IRA account. So this rule applies to everyone who contributes to a Roth IRA, whether they're 59.5 or 105 years old. It doesn't matter how old you are. This rule literally applies to everyone within that range. Now, if you withdraw money earlier than that 5-year rule, it can trigger the 10% penalty plus taxes. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that if you can avoid it whatsoever. Now, there are some exceptions to that, and I'll get into some of the exceptions in a second, because there are exceptions, and it's usually when you're in a bad situation where those exceptions actually apply. So the key thing to understand here is you can withdraw contributions, you cannot withdraw earnings. Earnings are the big key here. So if your money made money, then you can't pull that money out. At the time I'm recording this, you can max out a Roth IRA for $6,000 a year. So every time you put $6,000 into the Roth IRA, you can withdraw that $6,000 out. But if your $6,000 grows to $7,000 next year, you cannot pull $7,000 out. You will be penalized on that $1,000 by 10% in addition to taxes. So understanding that is incredibly important. Now, if you're younger than 59.5, how can you withdraw earnings? Well, if you've owned a Roth IRA for less than 5 years, you'll generally owe a 10% penalty if you withdraw any earnings. But there is ways to avoid the penalty, but not the income taxes. So you're always going to get taxed on the money, but there are ways to avoid the penalty if you meet one of the following exceptions. One of which is if you're withdrawing up to $10,000 to buy your first home. Now, this is actually a really cool thing, because if you withdraw $10,000 to buy your first home, first being the key word, then you may be able to avoid the 10% penalty. If you're withdrawing up to $5,000 in the year after the birth or adoption of your child, you can also potentially avoid the penalty, the 10% penalty. You'll still have to pay taxes on the money. If the withdrawal is also for a qualified education expense. These are things that people don't talk about with the Roth IRA that you can do. Sometimes you can utilize the Roth IRA for qualified education expenses. And with all of these, you want to make sure you're talking to your accountant if any of these qualify for you. Don't just go out and do it. Make sure you're actually talking to an accountant to ensure that you can do it within your specific situation. You can also withdraw for unreimbursed medical expenses in excess of 7.5% of your adjusted gross income for the year. So if you have massive medical expenses, you can also withdraw for that reason in excess of 7.5%. If the withdrawal is for a disability, you can withdraw if it's for health insurance premiums while you're unemployed. You can avoid the penalty if the withdrawal is made to a beneficiary of your estate after your death. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can withdraw earnings without that penalty, but I will leave a link down below so you can check that out if you're under the age of 59.5. Now, if you're over 59.5 and you've owned the account for 5 years, then you don't have to worry about that whatsoever. But if you're younger than 59.5, there are a number of ways to get the money out. Now, we've talked about ways to get money out of a Roth IRA if you retired early. So if you're interested in that, we have an episode on that. I'll leave a link down to that in the show notes as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this money Q&A video. If you guys have any questions or want to leave a question with me, hit me up on Instagram or TikTok at Master Money Co. And if you like this video, here's another Q&A video that I know you're going to love.